this first page, and just to kind of lay out how this class is going to work specifically, the first about 15 to 20 minutes, I would say, and we'll cover everything on this page here, is going to be really geared towards general event planning. So this is really going to be applicable to all teams. Any team that wants to host an event on campus, this is going to pertain to you, okay? The second portion of this class is really going to be focused on primarily the field teams, because that does add a little bit of an extra element and things that are necessary for Carter, for Parsons, for Dedham, you name it, that brings in a few extra topics as well. So for those teams that are not a field team, again, these first 15 to 20 minutes are going to be really, really the most important part of this class. Kind of before I dive into everything point by point, and I won't read everything because we will, again, send all this out. I think it's important to note, so you'll see this first section is considerations prior to an event. Really important for us to emphasize that all of these considerations, please know that they aren't excuses to not host an event. Most of you who are on this call are a part of a team that has hosted an event on campus. So you should know from the get-go, maybe most importantly, that we do want to help you host an event, okay? But that being said, it's really critical. The Northeastern, environment is very unique, and unique can sometimes be beneficial. And also in this case, there's a lot of different layers that we need to go through as administrators to make sure this is compliant with the university, and a lot of different other factors that need to get reined in to make sure we can execute this. So really points of emphasis in this section, when we're looking at your event request, okay? First and foremost, are you in season, and what's the sort of length that you're asking for? So I know some teams who are out of season, technically out of their traditional fall or spring, may take issue with this, but it's for the betterment of all the clubs that when you're in season, if you're a soccer in the fall, if you're a lacrosse in the spring, that you get priority over a team that already had their primary season and took a little bit of priority in terms of an event. You see that's just the normal ebbs and flows. That's top down. That's what varsity athletics does as well. This is not a unique platform for us. Okay. Other key factors: size of the event, and the logistics. This is a critical one. So we've had several different events. For example, we had a volleyball tournament this past winter. We had soccer games, you name it. Depending on the type of event, it does trigger some different entities on campus that need to be informed, that need to be involved. So the perfect example is this event open to the public? Okay, so if you're hosting an event in Cabot, okay, and it's open to the public, you're inviting everybody, that does trigger a need for an NUPD detail as well as some additional security. Okay, that's just one example of the things that we would need. Smaller event, a scrimmage, let's say basketball, you want to host a scrimmage during your practice time, and it's vetted and approved by our office, and you're just inviting the opposing team, that can be a little bit more simple. Just get the visiting team roster. But if it's open to the public, it's open to the public. And you know what that means in this era. It means extra security, extra police presence. Some of these, I'm sure you had a chance to read, so I'm not going to address all of them individually. But another specific example of something that may take some time before we can approve an event is the need for an athletic trainer, right? I mean, if you asked what the club sport model was 10 years ago, I bet there were very few athletic trainers. But as we kind of progress and elevate, club sports as a whole nationally has become more competitive, okay? And with that, it's great, but it also comes with a couple extra layers of needs there, and having an athletic trainer is certainly one of them, depending on the nature of the sport. Again, quickly going through some of the other departments that will need to be consulted depending on the event. Okay, I'll let you read through them, but you see it's a pretty vast list. Okay, you want to know why we ask for a lot of lead time when requesting an event? Here it is right in front of you. This is exactly why. These are all of the factors that we need to consider, that we need to consult in order to make this event happen. It is not as simple, unfortunately, at Northeastern as we've got the open time. Great, let's have an event. It is far from that simple, and as you can see, very much more complex than that. Okay.
I do think it's really important to emphasize what he just said, is that there are so many other entities that we need to get involved in this process, that, you know, we have deadlines set up. A lot of the reason is because of this. So it's not necessarily a deadline that we put out that just because we need the time. It's because we need to go and we need to talk to athletic ops and get the approval to use the facility. We need to talk to athletic facilities in order to be able to have everything set up, move goals or lift baskets or whatever it is. They need to be involved in that. Campus recreation, if you're in Marino or Squash Busters, we need to go through them, make sure that schedules line up with what they have, the approval to have external groups come in where they need to involve Key Point and Northeast Security. And so it's a lot of different steps that we need to go through in order to get the approval for even just one, what you might think, one simple, easy event that you want to put on. Even practices too, it's the same thing, which we talked about last week, but because of that, like, these are all the considerations that go into it. So when putting out these deadlines, that's why it's so important that things are submitted early on, and it won't be just a quick 2-day turnover. It will take time in order to get that approval.
Yeah, I would say for me, my only thing, once again, to build off what Drew said, is it's not meant to discourage, but it's meant to inform. And so these are just the things that go along with it. So it's good for you to have this information.
Yeah, and great points, both Chelsea and Tyler. I think building off that, and I kind of want to rewind a little bit to last week's class where we really dove into those facility request forms and what sort of information we need from you. If you can look, I've highlighted sort of the most important elements that when you're filling out that facility request form, these are absolutely critical. And we might even highlight it when we send this out to you. This is absolutely critical information that we need to know on that facility request form on the type of an event. You know, you might think saying a fundraiser is enough information, but what if there's minors involved? Again, open to the public. We need to dive into some of these things. What are you wanting to charge for tickets? That's a perfect example. If you're a team that needs a specific court request in terms of different lines, different chairs, whatever it might be, these are things that we need to know in that facility request. So keep that in mind as well. Nick, did we miss anything or should we proceed?
I also did want to emphasize for those folks who are even external, they use, Equestrian uses an external facility, or rock climbing and stuff like that. If you plan on having fundraisers or alumni events or get-togethers or anything like that, even though you might be going through alumni relations, it still does need to go through us so that we can check off all of these things, because alumni relations in that instance would be there to help put the logistics together for the event, and not necessarily getting the time and the space and making sure that it's open and that stuff. That is still us. And those facility requests do still need to come in, and we do still need to check with all of these different entities. So even if you're thinking, okay, I'm an external, I use an external facility, it doesn't matter as long as you are going to be putting an event on campus at any point in time, fundraiser or anything. It does need to still go through all these steps to get the approvals.
Absolutely. So segueing into sort of the on-site responsibilities, this is really the last portion of sort of the broad-based information that we're going to give for all teams. So during and after an event, this is absolutely critical. We've had, times in the past where there hasn't really been a firm understanding of what the executives are supposed to do, what the building supervisors are tasked to do in a Cabot, in a Marino, in a Squash Busters, for example. And this really is hopefully going to serve as sort of a reference point on what you as leaders are expected to do on the day of the event. And I think really quickly, it really is important. I mean, we're here to sort of guide and reserve time and give guidance. But at the end of the day, when you're on site and you're hosting an event, that's where your expansive e-board is really supposed to be involved. I mean, it's not, we have the space and let the event rip. It really does take a lot of intentional work from the executive board to make this happen. So a couple of points within this section. Again, we're checking in with the building staff. We're making sure that everybody's on the same page. Even a simple introduction. Hey, I'm the president of Club Badminton, and we're hosting an event today, and just want to make sure, let me know if we can help in any way. That makes a huge difference. Okay? And with that relationship that you want to forge with the on-site staff in whatever building you're in, really assisting with the check-in of the opposing teams. Okay? We talked about in the first section how if you're hosting in an external team, a Boston University, whatever it might be, that we do require those rosters ahead of time. That's exactly the time where you should have that roster up as well, and you're at the point of entry and you're helping that staff check in the opponent. Okay? In this new era as well, this is more of a prediction than something that's been implemented in the past, but with likely new standards in terms of capacity and gatherings, that's going to probably be a new expectation of our executives during an event to really make sure that we're not exceeding any sort of room or space capacity, again, given this new era that we're in. Helping out with ensuring all of the facility policies as well. Again, critical. If you are a team that hosts an event in Marino or Cabot or Squash Busters, you should really know those policies heading into it, okay? Because you are those frontline ambassadors of the university to your opponents. A lot of times you are the first contact, maybe the only contact that BU has with Northeastern University. And being an executive, you are a steward of the university, and you're supposed to represent those policies, those procedures in every way possible. Last thing I'll kind of emphasize in this section is if you have a clock need, scoreboard, any sort of small logistical setup during an event, make sure that is up to you. That is not something where we show up to the pool, we show up to the basketball courts at Cabot, and we expect that there's going to be a running scoreboard ready for you to press go. Those things don't just happen. And then beyond that, during the game, that's exactly where you should be delegating that responsibility to somebody on your e-board, somebody who may not be participating in that exact event, but is a part of your team. They can run the clock, they can run the scoreboard, things of that nature. So again, really the point of this is to serve as, to inform you of what you should be expecting when you get on site. And we'll get into it later on, especially with the field teams, on sort of what the Carter staff, what NUPD does, and what athletic facilities does. But this is important, broad-based for all executives, no matter what facility, to know what sort of their responsibilities are when they get on the premises. So that's pretty much all I have for that section. But again, I'll toss it out to the rest of our staff to kind of fill in the gaps.
During the event and after the event, not every single event will have an event manager present. So when they do, their responsibilities are to make sure that people are behaving and respecting the facility. They are making sure that nobody is sneaking off and venturing around the building, especially because you all see how strict they are with people getting in and knowing where they are, and you need to swipe in. There needs to be a name to a face, really, so that they can backtrack. So when it comes to that, that's their responsibility, making sure people in the stands aren't getting a little crazy and saying rude and malicious things to people on the court, yelling at refs, that they're not, drinking alcohol, anything like that. So their responsibility when we schedule them at your events are to monitor the crowd and make sure that everything off the court is going smoothly. So they aren't there to run the clock for you. That is not an acceptable responsibility for them. So what teams have done, they can bring a friend to run the clock, or like Drew said, and somebody who's not playing, anything like that. That's where you need to assign somebody to do that. And they are also CPR 80 first aid certified, but that does not mean that you don't need your safety officer there. Safety officers need to be present for everything. So making sure that you are still following all those expectations that are put on you to be an executive.
Yeah, great point, Chelsea. Absolutely, the safety officer is absolutely key. No matter where you are, what type of an event, that is absolutely critical and required. I think the last thing I'll add to this section that I didn't emphasize is making sure that you stick with the strict time, reservation time that's given to you and allocated and approved by our office. Okay. You won't always know what's going on before you. And that's the nature of it. And talk about capacity issues. We can't have an issue where, in a condensed space, everybody's showing up a half an hour early when there could be very likely a different event, either varsity, rec, you name it, right before you. So it's very critical on the front end to not, join the facility before you're supposed to, or join the actual event space. And then on the back end too, really critical to be respectful of the other reservations in that facility. I promise you, most of our athletic facilities are booked from sun up to sundown. And there's very likely, if it's within operating hours of the building, there's going to be somebody right after you. Okay. And just like you would want that courtesy on the front end, we need to make sure that courtesy is given on the back end as well.
Reach out to us in advance, especially if it's a new, idea or event. We'll help. That's what we're here for. We'll navigate it. You don't have to know every single department and contact. We're your contact people. We will navigate it with you. We'll explain it to you. We're happy to. And we're gonna advocate to get it done as fast as possible. So just continue to communicate, and we'll kind of knock all this out. So that's it.
Perfect. On a similar note from what we started with during this class, this last section is really going to break down, and again, you'll have this with you, what the expectations are from our Carter staff, our club executives, which would be you, obviously, athletic facilities, and then if Northeastern Police gets involved, what their role is. So we'll start with Carter staff. Actually, Justin and Alexis, who are on this call, have been one of our two best employees in terms of Carter staff, and they know the job inside and out too. So if they have anything, they're welcome to contribute. But for these purposes, for your knowledge, if you've ever hosted an event at Carter, you will have seen a Justin, an Alexis, anyone else on our staff that is labeled event staff or club sports. You'll see those people out there. And they are strictly meant to be on site for the duration of our reservations out at Carter. So you will see them. They are not, it's not a myth. They will be there typically near the press box. Donkeys is sort of their headquarters, but they'll be up and about throughout the entire day if you're out at Carter Field. So some of their roles, I'll pick out a couple. Again, monitoring the attendance. That's big when we go inside the air structure. I don't need to go into further detail than that. If you had an event in the air structure, you know how strict that rule is that we are under occupancy. So another key portion of their responsibilities is, and we've gone over this, but they are really supposed to be the stewards, the representatives for transitioning of programs. Okay, so I can't stress this enough. This is a constant public relations emphasis from Northeastern. Okay, you know this as well as anybody. Carter Field is not a Northeastern park. It is not owned by Northeastern. We simply have the time within the city programming their activities that we can set aside for our needs. Okay, and a lot of times, particularly on the weekends, you might have an event that's right after a City of Boston programming of some nature. Okay, the last thing we need is folks on your team, and again, you're the leaders of your team, so this needs to be emphasized. The last thing we need is for an exchange, even if it's somewhat productive. Typically what we try to do is filter all communications with Boston Parks, with other programming, through our Carter staff. Okay, that's one of their main roles. They're supposed to be the spokesperson. They're supposed to handle issues with a Boston coach and letting them know that their time is almost up or is up and it's time to clear the field. They are trained to handle those situations. Okay, we've had NUPD training. We've had extensive training on our end internally with our staff members. Let them handle it. Okay, plain and simple. Other things. So if you, speaking of field setup, if you have some of those needs, they are going to be responsible to making sure that all of those items are open to you, whether that be pylons, whether that be benches, whatever it could be. Those items are made possible because the Carter staff knows to unlock the storage shed and work with you all to make sure you have what you need. Okay. Last thing I want to emphasize about the Carter staff is they are really serving as the primary supervisor of the activity on the field. Okay. And where this really plays a part is when it comes to weather. Now, thankfully, we haven't had too many issues in the last 2 years outside at Carter that have really curtailed an important event from you all, but it's only a matter of time. Okay. And we're prepared for it. So our staff is constantly getting updates and in constant communication with our office. We've got, without getting into too much detail, we have a weather app that's extremely comprehensive, monitors any sort of inclement weather within a 30-mile radius, and instructions on what that means. Okay. So again, there might be referees, there might be your coach, there might be opposing coaches, maybe somebody from your conference. All of them are, obviously big parts of the event. But when it comes to shutting down an event, suspending, or taking shelter for an extended period of time, that is solely up to the Carter staff, and they need to be identified as such. Okay, that is not up to you folks. That is not up to coaches. Again, that is up to the Carter staff because they are working behind the scenes with the most updated information and us from our office. So that is really critical to emphasize as well. Nick, Chelsea, miss anything on Carter staff? Justin, Alexis?
I mean, I will just add to that we know how important these competitions are to you. So we're going to do everything in our power to hold it. They have instructions on how to hold competitions if it's weather that looks like it could clear up in a time frame that it wouldn't kind of impact other programs or impact in other areas. So our number one goal is to, if it's safe, obviously it's safety first, but if we can, is to continue to run the event. We do get notifications off the NCAA software that they use for weather. So they're going to use the same guidelines we use essentially the same guidelines. If an NCAA game is getting canceled due to weather, that's kind of our mark too. So we're how much it would probably take to cancel an event like that or a tournament like that. We're at the same level. So it's not like we're going to be, we have a really good software essentially to track this. So that's why I think it was really good that Drew emphasized that.
All right. So moving on to your role. So common theme of today's class is kind of going over what you should expect, your team, your entire organization. So a lot of your work is done before we get on site. Okay. And that's important to mention because, you know, information, like I mentioned in the previous section, of this is not a Northeastern field. You know, this is not the game starts at 2, but show up at 12 and start warming up. That is critical to understand. And that's not just at Carter, that's at Parsons and Dedham as well, with likely activity before your reservation. So a lot of what your role is as an executive, again, mentioned this before, that you are a lot of times the first and only contact. You need to be giving this information. And we can help you in that information as well, to set the tone for when opponents come in to play you on campus or at Parsons or Dedham. Okay. So when you arrive to Carter or anywhere that we have staff, just like I said earlier, make sure to introduce yourself to our Carter staff. Hey, I'm the president. I'm the vice president. I'm the event chair of our club. And this should really be working in tandem. You know, we talk about it all the time with our staff, that there are some times where they have to dip into different roles that maybe isn't laid out specifically in their job description. But the whole point, the whole emphasis that we put on game day operations is, you know, this should really be a partnership between club executives, our staff, NUPD, an athletic trainer, if applicable. Like this is a team effort. We should not be operating in silos and not talking to each other and not understanding what the roles are of each other. Okay. Water jugs, that's a great example. For Carter specifically, we have them, but that would be, again, something that would be a specific request. You can put it in the facility request form. You can reach out to us weeks in advance just to make sure that we have that availability to provide those with you. This is more general and more just being a good steward of the space, is pick up the trash, you know, during and after your event. Okay. It's not a very good look to have items spread out throughout the field after an event. It's very easy to know who was there and who didn't fulfill their expectations there. So keep that in mind, please. A couple of important things to mention to your opponents. Okay. Restroom use, as you know by now, at least as it pertains to Carter, the restroom use for Carter Field is on the first floor of Squash Busters. Okay. That is the only floor that's accessible to opponents or parents or fans, what have you. So when asked about that, you could even preemptively say, you know, this is where you can access the restroom if needed. The other big one, the other hot topic is parking. Okay. A lot of teams will be coming to Boston and aren't familiar with the parking, and it can be intimidating, to say the least. So obviously street parking, follow the signs, self-explanatory. If you wish to purchase parking passes for the Renaissance Garage right near IV, Northeastern, and through their, you know, auxiliary, I think Mass Park they use, they do offer day parking passes. Okay. So if you want to add that extra touch of customer service and you want to, that's a perfect use of a team expense. Okay. If you want to create a better experience and you want to just say, hey, meet me here and I'll give you a pass, and then here's directions to the garage. Perfect. That's, again, a perfect way to utilize that. But you're going to get that question, I promise you. For people that aren't used to Boston, it can be an intimidating process to park. So transitioning into another entity, it was in the list up top, but we'll dive into it in a little bit of a deeper focus here, is athletic facilities. So just for your knowledge, again, and this is the Northeastern model, the athletic facilities department is not a part of athletics and recreation. Okay. Why is that important? Because oftentimes they have different reporting chains. They have different information. They're not in the day-to-day meetings that we have with athletics, with athletic operations. A lot of times they will show up on site as an employee, and they've been told move goals without any other information on what the event is, what to expect, the exact time. So sometimes they aren't given the full scope of information because they're not within, again, the athletics and recreation umbrella. Again, why is that important? And I'll go back to what I said earlier about funneling communication. For the most part, it's really important that athletic facilities and our Carter staff, they're the ones that are communicating. Okay, the Carter staff knows the day layout of programming, and they also know many of the employees in athletic facilities. They know the supervisor for athletic facilities. They obviously can call us at any time. So again, really important that if somebody in the red shirts comes up to you, hey, who's in charge here? As much as we like to see you take control of situations and be a leader in this particular situation, because it involves so many aspects. Really, it's important to point them in the direction of our Carter staff and let them figure out the best way to handle a situation, a setup need, goals, what have you. That's really critical, because if they get different information, that's really not going to be beneficial to them sort of offering that support. Okay, their role specifically, touched on it. They're really supposed to be putting together the field. So when it comes to lining a week in advance, when it comes to setting up the goals, maybe 15 minutes before your event, uprights, benches, and then doing some field sweeps at the end of the game. Okay, we fought long and hard to bring them into the mix, and to this extent. So these are the published expectations that we have of them. And again, not operating in silos, things can happen, but this is really, again, their published role as it relates to Carter Field, Parsons, Dedham. That goes for all those three facilities. So, so Northeastern Police. This is something that, because of Carter, because of the nature of it, it's a public park. We talked about earlier, if something's open to the public, well, if there's two open fields like Carter is in the fall and the spring, by definition, every event is open to the public, right? I mean, how do you monitor access when there's probably 10 different access points and a passive park around it? The short answer is you can't monitor that. It's not a closed event. So any sort of event, there's practices that can occur without an NUPD officer, but any sort of event that involves an opposing team, perhaps added fans, parents, you name it, we are going to likely assign a Northeastern police officer. Okay. And just like I said with athletic facilities, really, if they're asking who's in charge, that's where the Carter staff comes in, because again, they have the layout of the entire day. Okay. Their primary responsibility when they are there is the safety, the health, and of the participants, of the fans, and also really serve as that primary and first responder if there should happen to, God forbid, an emergency during the event, whether that be with a spectator, a player on the field, you name it. So as you often know, having a police presence, sometimes just being a presence is beneficial, even if they aren't necessarily putting out issues or fires of that nature. So they are certainly an important partner to us. And it's more for your knowledge to know that if you're going to have an event, this is one other layer of support that, our office typically can, assumes financially and just trying to provide that extra security. So keeping that in mind won't happen for every single practice and event, but if they're there, they're usually there for a reason, and that's it. So, okay. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time today. Hope you found it useful.